This is The Listening Tube.
Hello, thank you for putting your ear to the Listening Tube. I'm your host, Bob Woodley. On this episode, we'll hear about men pretending to be women and the battle for San Antonio they didn't tell us about in school. Plus, I'll opine about Democrats, media, and Nazis. Don't assume those are three different things. But first,
Not the headlines.
I don't usually talk about sports on the program, but I noticed something that I haven't heard anyone else mention, so I thought I'd bring it up. The New England Patriots are currently the top team in the American Conference of the NFL. As many of you might know, the Patriots, under the direction of coach Bill Belichick and quarterback Tom Brady, earned the right to play in 9 Super Bowls in 20 seasons, winning 6 of them. When Tom Brady left to play for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and won another Super Bowl, giving him an average of 1 Super Bowl victory every 3 years in the league, while Bill Belichick failed to win another Super Bowl, everyone said it was because of Tom Brady that the Patriots won all those Super Bowls. But now that both Tom Brady and Bill Belichick are gone, the Patriots are once again, and not far removed from the last time, the best team in the AFC. Their new coach, Mike Vrabel, was a player for the Patriots for many of their successful seasons, having won 3 Super Bowls as a player. If the Patriots go on to play in this season's Super Bowl, regardless if they win or lose, the only logical conclusion for the success of the team is not Tom Brady nor Bill Belichick, although they deserve a lot of credit. The reason for the success of the team is owner Robert Kraft. After all, he drafted Tom Brady. He hired Bill Belichick. He drafted Mike Vrabel to be a player and later hired him to coach the team. Of course, football is the ultimate team sport, and none of these men who played or coached would have had such success if it were not for the men who also played and coached next to them. But the success of the Patriots over the last quarter of a century has only one common denominator: team owner Robert Kraft.
You can hang your hat on that.
I'm going to play something for you now, and as you listen to it, I'd like you to imagine what it might mean. In 3, 2, 1. Fine, I won't make you agonize over it. That was the sound of a television commercial. It comes on every morning on my local Fox affiliate, Fox 56, from the Scranton-Wilkes-Barre area of Pennsylvania. I know this because I put the news on with my phone from the YouTube TV app. The commercial we just heard often comes on while I'm in the shower, so I hear it, but I don't see it. When I was in broadcasting school, we studied both radio and television. Radio is, of course, entirely audio, but television adds the elements of light and vision. Regardless, we were taught the audio of a visual message should always be able to stand alone. In other words, the message should still come through even if someone can't see the picture. And that makes perfect sense, as you're dealing with 2 different sources of delivery and you want to take full advantage of both of them. But I'm going to guess that you perceived no universal message from that audio. And if you couldn't see the accompanying pictures or video, it meant nothing to you. In a related story, Media Confidential reports that iHeartMedia, the largest audio company in the United States, has banned all content generated by artificial intelligence. That includes music and the sounds of the human voice. For the record, I have proclaimed on this program that I am not, nor will I ever be, a product of artificial intelligence. I don't think I'm important enough for anyone to want to duplicate me, but if you have any questions about whether or not I said something, you can always contact me at thelisteningtube.com. I'll be happy to confirm if I said it or if I believe it. And I think it's great that iHeart is willing to make a commitment to human content. Not just music, which is very important to the people who earn royalties for their creativity, but also for the podcasters who have been inundated with thousands of AI-generated episodes as competition for your attention. There needs to be a wall between human-generated content and AI-generated content, and both can exist, but we should always know the difference. And for iHeart to deny a platform to AI-generated content is an honorable thing to do. It ensures that we still have that human connection when we turn on the radio. According to the story, iHeart will employ a branding campaign that will require all personalities to proclaim their humanity once an hour. Guaranteed human will be assured on all iHeart content. I'm not going to get into the history of radio here, but most of us alive today have a very personal relationship with our local radio stations and local personalities. It's what makes radio special. It connects you with what's happening locally in a way that satellite can't or streaming can't. The people you hear talking to you are people who live in your community. Plus, they play the music you like. But iHeart changed all that. Slowly but surely, iHeart has taken the local out of radio. Most of iHeart programming is from somewhere other than where the listener is, geographically speaking. It used to be that radio broadcasts had a limited area of influence, but that's not the case anymore. That reminds me of the time I was hosting a call-in talk show on WISL in Shamokin, Pennsylvania called Viewpoint 148. Because it was on 1480 AM. Quite frankly, I didn't get a lot of calls, so I would often solicit them. It got to the point that I would start the show by saying, "This is Viewpoint 148, I'm Bob Woodley, and yes, I am prepared to speak uninterrupted for the entire length of the program." That was back in 1999. One time, I solicited calls by telling the listeners that if they're listening from out of state, to call collect. Well, the owner of the station comes barreling into the studio to tell me that they will not accept any collect calls from out of state. And I calmly looked at her and said, "Nobody out of state could hear me." She turned and walked away. Today, anybody anywhere in the world can hear what you have to say on the radio or on a podcast if it's streaming. That's what makes local radio with local personality so important. But iHeart has demolished the local radio landscape. When you listen to an iHeart radio station, you're likely listening to someone who has no connection to your community at all. They'll disguise it by mentioning local towns in the liners between the songs, but it's only a disguise. So although iHeart promises to bring you only human content, you might not know where that human is. It's probably not the guy or gal you might meet in the local supermarket or see at a city holiday event. So iHeart is compelled to declare that they're guaranteed human, but have at the same time eliminated much of the human element of radio by piping in programs from other cities into radio stations around the country. The iHeart company has done more to ruin the humanity of local radio than any company could. It literally ruined its own product. So much that it now has to reassure listeners that they're actually listening to a real human being. That might not be an issue if iHeart hadn't taken the local out of radio in the first place. Do you remember that audio clip I played for you earlier? Probably not. Here it is again. That was an iHeart commercial. iHeart, as I mentioned earlier, is America's largest audio company, with content that includes the most powerful media, radio, and podcasts, as well as streaming audio. The largest audio company in the country doesn't know how to use audio properly in their own promos. It was meant to be an encouragement to use iHeart for audio entertainment, but you wouldn't know that if the commercial came on while you were in the shower.
Well, that can't be right.
A former high school dropout has filed a lawsuit with the Federal Department of Justice against just about every college in California. And no, it's not because they all said he was too stupid to go to college. He actually ended up with 2 college degrees, one from a community college and another from a university, both in California. So what's his gripe? He's already defied all the odds as a dropout to being educated by the California system well enough to file a lawsuit. You'd think he'd be grateful, but he's claiming discrimination. Tim Snowball is the lead attorney for the lawsuit brought by the Equal Protection Project, an organization that claims to be devoted to the fair treatment of all persons without regard to race nor ethnicity. Their mission statement goes on to say, "Our guiding principle is that there is no good form of racism. The remedy for racism never is more racism." By racism, they mean being treated differently because of your race. I'm guessing the racism Mr. Snowball is talking about is one that he may have had to overcome while pursuing his degrees. I don't know. With a name like Snowball, I'm picturing a person constructed of 3 separate parts wearing a top hat. So what kind of discrimination is he alleging? Discrimination against American-born students.
Bob didn't believe it.
The lawsuit claims that the University of California, as well as California State University and California Community Colleges, plus 138 participating California public colleges and universities, are violating Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the equal protections guaranteed by the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. How? It turns out that all of the institutions named in the lawsuit have programs specifically for undocumented students that aren't available to native students. Students born in the United States aren't welcome. Programs like financial aid advice and assistance, counseling of various types, and other services that all students could use, but are only available to those who aren't legally in the United States, or those considered DACA because they were brought here as children. Don't get me wrong, it's great that these types of programs exist, but you can't say no Americans allowed. Mr. Snowball asks the question, if our own institutions of higher education discriminate against American-born students, how can we trust those institutions to educate the next generation of leaders? That may sound like a rhetorical question, but it may not remain that way if it's answered in a court of law. But the trust of our institutions isn't on trial. It's the benefits provided by colleges to students who are exclusively not American-born. That's discrimination. It's the old-fashioned kind of discrimination, not one based on your skin color, but on your country of origin. Like back in the day when the Irish were discriminated against, or how people made fun of Polish people, or how racial slurs were based on the food staple of the area of origin. But this time, it's American-born students being discriminated against in America because they are American by the college system of California. Tim Snowball knows what he's talking about when it comes to this issue and is fortunate to now be in a position to help remedy the discrimination. I was a high school dropout and know exactly what it's like to need extra support in becoming a successful college student, he was quoted as saying in the story. He continued by adding, tutoring programs, career counseling, and financial aid are an important part of this process. But such benefits should never be withheld from American-born students in favor of DACA or undocumented students.
Let's go back through the listening tube for This Week in History.
This week in 1660, a woman, either Margaret Hughes or Anne Marshall, appears on an English public stage for the first time, in the role of Desdemona in a production of Shakespeare's play Othello. Until 1660, only men were allowed to perform on stage. That means that they needed men who could play the roles of women. Imagine the uproar when women were allowed to perform on stage from all the men who were until then cast in the roles of women. Imagine the controversy when men who pretended to be women were forced out of pretending to be something by the actual something the men were pretending to be. It's like if you're filming Jurassic Park and an actual velociraptor shows up and wants to be in the movie, and the director is like, "No thanks, we already have a fake one." The reverse seems to be happening today. Men are again pretending to be women and taking away opportunities from the women who earned them. So while progressives proclaim that they'll never go back, it looks like they have by letting men return to the roles of women like it was in 1659 England.
The 1800s.
This week in 1835, the Texian Army captures San Antonio, Texas. Back then, Texas was a part of Mexico, but it was in a war for independence. A man from Kentucky named Ben Milam became a soldier in the Mexican army in Texas. But when Santa Anna overthrew the Mexican Republic and became a dictator, Milam renounced his Mexican citizenship and became a part of a rebellion of sorts to make Texas independent from Mexico. He knew that Santa Anna's forces were headed to San Antonio, but generals above him wanted to delay any attack until spring. When Milam congregated soldiers and, according to the story on History.com, asked, "Who will go with old Ben Milam to San Antonio?" 300 of them did, and they defeated the army of Santa Anna to proclaim control of San Antonio. Ben Milam was killed early in the fighting, so he never knew how the battle would turn out. It's just as well, though. When spring did come, Santa Anna's forces returned and reclaimed San Antonio. You might have heard about it. It's remembered as the Battle of the Alamo, where legends like Davy Crockett and Jim Bowie, namesake of the Bowie knife, met their glorious doom. The Alamo is still a major tourist attraction in San Antonio, mostly for the battle that happened there in 1836, but also for where Ozzy Osbourne got arrested for peeing. This week in 1851, the first YMCA in North America is established in Montreal, Quebec. Montreal? Raise your hand if you thought the YMCA was an American institution. Yeah. If YMCA by the Village People was in French, would Donald Trump still be allowed to dance to it?
The 1900s.
This week in 1941, Adolf Hitler announces extermination of the Jews at a meeting in the Reich Chancellery. When you know what kinds of things Hitler did, it becomes easy to see why it's absurd to compare President Trump to Adolf Hitler. Anyone who does so is only trying to incite violence and spread hatred among the American people. More on that in a moment. And this week in 1991, Russian Federation gains independence from the USSR. Vladimir Putin has been trying to rejoin it for 2 decades now.
The listening tube will return at the speed of sound. Send email to thelisteningtube@outlook.com.
I'm a news junkie, always have been, and I've spent a lot of time on this program criticizing the legacy media for the way they've strayed from the responsibility of delivering the news in an unbiased way that listeners and viewers can trust and rely upon to help them make informed decisions about their lives and who they support politically and what policies they may agree with or disagree with. That's what leads to civil discourse. When we have the correct information, we're able to collectively decide what's best for our communities, our states, and our country. But a majority of the press prefer to promote agendas, agendae, whatever the plural of agenda is, rather than just give us the information we need to make up our own minds. The press has convinced itself that we're not smart enough to make the right choices about how we want our country to be run. They most often promote liberal values instead of conservative ones, and it's gotten more extreme since Donald Trump became president again. As a result, the press has convinced the weak-minded among us to support criminals more than victims, that federal law enforcement officers are thugs who kidnap people and constantly violate the Constitution, and that people transporting drugs into the United States are innocent fishermen who are victims of Donald Trump's perceived racism. The press has gone out of its way to try to convince us that illegal aliens who are being deported are just grandparents and kindergarten teachers, or that people are being rounded up only because they have brown skin. They'll gladly show you video of Democrats saying that Donald Trump hates brown people. There's no reason to believe that, but the press will show it again and again. They push the narrative that our federal law enforcement officers are Gestapo and Nazis, resulting in the demonization of the federal agency created and funded by Congress, who are doing the job we hire them and pay them with tax dollars to do. And no matter how much grief it causes for the men and women doing the job, and no matter how much chaos it creates in the cities where the help is most needed, the Democrats and the press just keep peddling this whole Nazi thing because, as the Nazis proved, if you repeat a lie often enough, it becomes the truth. At least for a while. That's why they keep telling us that they're trying to save democracy, while also calling for violence whenever the people don't vote for what they want. The destruction to Tesla cars and dealerships is a fine example of how intolerant the left is, while claiming to be inclusive. They criticize firing on drug boats headed for American territory, but defend spending millions of dollars on recovery programs for those who survived the scourge of fentanyl. No sympathy for those who didn't. One congressman who was privy to the debriefing of the recent controversial firing on a drug boat, I believe it happened on September 2nd, but was just brought to light, was critical of what he saw. A boat was fired upon twice, also killing those who survived the first strike. Democrats are calling this a war crime. Representative Jim Himes of Connecticut made a statement after the briefing. He said, "What I saw in that room was one of the most troubling things I've seen in my time in public service." Well, buck up, Buttercup. The congressman's sensitivity doesn't take into account all the lives of Americans that could be ruined by the successful delivery of the contents of that boat. He'd rather Americans suffer instead of him having to watch a classified video of people being killed trying to smuggle narcotics into the United States. The congressman went on to say, "You have two individuals in clear distress without any means of locomotion, with a destroyed vessel, who are killed by the United States." So, you're saying our military did their job. Nice of you to give them credit, Congressman Himes, but it didn't sound like you were happy about it. Whose side are you on? It's just more of protecting the villains instead of the victims under the leftist philosophy of anarchy when they're not the ones enforcing the law. As I've said on this program before, whomever controls the executive branch controls which laws are enforced. Regardless of how many times the left says no one's above the law, the right seems to be more interested in enforcing them. A fine example would be all the protections the Democrats are promoting for illegal aliens who came in under the Biden administration. They literally fight, both on the streets and in the courts, to not have the law enforced when it comes to migrants who did not come to America through the proper channels. They suddenly forget that no one is above the law. The left accuses the right of weaponizing the justice system, but they forget that they're the ones who used lawfare to its fullest extent to try to keep Donald Trump from becoming president again. When the president enforces the law to hold responsible those who abused it against him, the Democrats cry foul. Like they don't expect anyone to remember what they did to him. New York AG Letitia James literally ran on the platform that she'd go after Donald Trump if elected. And New York Democrats did vote for it. President Trump was also charged in Georgia by an overzealous prosecutor who promised to hold Trump accountable for imaginary charges by a corrupt DA. By the way, both corrupt DAs from New York and Georgia still hold office, so democracy appears to be working. They both would have been hung by now if President Trump was the king they claim he is. If he was the next incarnation of Hitler, the Iranians would still have a thriving nuclear weapons program. If ICE officers were the Gestapo, they would only be arresting people based on religion and lifestyle, not border violations. Here's what I've noticed. Every time the Democrats accuse the Republicans of something, it turns out it's the Democrats who are actually doing it. And they have way more in common with the Nazi Party than the Republicans ever could. Just off the top of my head, the left is clearly anti-Semitic, as has been demonstrated by their support of pro-Hamas demonstrations in New York and on college campuses on both coasts of the U.S. The Democrat platform is similar to the Nazis inasmuch as it wants control over much of our personal lives. Our political viewpoints are the obvious main goal, but control of school curriculum, when the Republicans are moving to give control to the states. Banking privileges, as when Democrats have already shown the willingness to deny someone access to their own money in order to control them. Government-mandated health care, which was the sole cause of the longest government shutdown ever. Control of the media and a tax and spend mentality are all more in alignment with the German Workers' Party, aka the Nazi Party, than any policy the Republicans have. The origins of the Nazi Party were also against capitalism and blamed the Jews for the world's problems. Sound familiar? If it does, it's because the Democrats are posturing themselves in such a way as to slide into the same doctrine as the Nazi Party while accusing the opposition of doing it. All the signs are there. The Democrats are joining with the socialists to create another version of the Nazi Party. The targets will be similar: people of specific religions and people who believe in free expression. The Democrats have already shown us what will happen if they get control again when it comes to the media. We now know that the Biden administration pressured social media companies to stifle free expression. Testimony from the founder of Facebook and the purchase of Twitter by Elon Musk exposed the measures taken by the Democrats to control what we were allowed to read and see and hear. On the other side of the coin, Donald Trump started his own social media site without any such restrictions from the government. Which sounds more Nazi-like to you? The Democrats have consistently constrained the production of industry. They've tried to control it through union negotiations as well as regulations. So did the Nazis. The Republicans promote the free market and the theory of supply and demand. Back when West Berlin had a wall around it and Nazism was against the law, the socialists ran East Berlin and East Germany. If you wanted to buy a car, a new one, you had to pay for it in advance, and you got whichever car came off the assembly line when your name came up. It could be up to 2 years later from what I was told when I lived in West Berlin, a free market economy where I could buy a BMW any day of the week, except Saturday afternoon and Sunday. And they were pretty strict about it, too. I lingered a little too long in a cuckoo clock store one time, and the lady hissed at me. Oh, and which party wants to take your guns? Just like the Nazi Party, the Democrats are the party of gun control instead of responsible gun legislation. Criminals don't follow gun laws, so it's a complicated scenario to be sure, but more gun laws may not solve any problems. The point is, the Constitution is law, and the Democrats would rather not have it that way. Clearly, when you examine the doctrines and policies and practices of the Nazi Party as they compare to the Republican Party, the Democrats are more closely aligned with the Nazis than the Republicans. Yet it is the Democrats who continuously compare the leadership and practices of the Republicans with the Nazis. It's another example of the Democrats accusing the Republicans of doing something when it's the Democrats who are actually doing it. It's a smokescreen orchestrated by the socialists and a willing media. A media willing to abandon their responsibility to the American people in order to diminish the effectiveness of the President of the United States. Not to hold our government accountable, as is the job of the media, but to create a false narrative of what's described as success and what's described as failure. All in an effort to promote an agenda that most of the country voted against. That's not reporting. It's propaganda. Allow me to use a headline from CNN as an example. The headline from December 4th is as follows. ICE operation in Minnesota will target undocumented Somali immigrants, a federal official says, as Trump ramps up attacks against the community. Well, if you didn't know that the ICE operation was the result of a billion-dollar fraud scheme perpetuated by a large number of Somali immigrants and ignored, if not supplied by, the governor of Minnesota that may have supplied a terrorist group, then you might think it was a bad thing. Why is Trump picking on Somalis? And because Somalis sounds like tamales, half of the wackos protesting it will think they're from Mexico. The headline refers to the targets of the operation as undocumented Somali immigrants, not illegal aliens. I'm sure there are plenty of Somalis who live in Minnesota who are legal immigrants, but CNN lumps them all together to blend your support of immigration with the idea that there are no illegal immigrants. But that's not even the most egregious demonstration of the headline's disdain for the Trump administration. It literally says, Trump ramps up attacks against the community. That line alone should be enough to get CNN fined for not telling the truth. Using the word attack isn't an accident. CNN is trying to get you to believe that the President of the United States is waging war on Americans. By using the generic word community instead of a more accurate term like illegal alien fraudsters, CNN can try to get you to believe that swarms of masked men are going to sweep through a swath of Minnesota and scoop up anyone who doesn't look like them. And the governor of Minnesota will tell you the same thing because he was warned that the fraud was happening and took measures to keep it hidden. I'll give Governor Walz credit, though. That's not Nazism. What he did is beneath Nazism. He took advantage of the social programs that made Minnesota a magnet for fraud and let the fraud benefit enemies of the United States. And because of the support of the media, he almost became vice president of the United States. The Listening Tube is written and produced by yours truly. Copyright 2025. Thank you for putting your ear to the Listening Tube. Shout out to some new places tuning in: Spring Hill, Florida, Surprise, Arizona, and Sussex Inlet, New South Wales. Follow The Listening Tube at thelisteningtube.com. I'm your host, Bob Woodley, for Thou ad infinitum.